In the autumn of 1907, the United States stood on the edge of total financial collapse. Banks were failing by the hour. Crowds clawed at locked doors, desperate to pull out their savings before the money ran out. There was no Federal Reserve, no government safety net, no one with the authority to stop the bleeding. And so the fate of the entire American economy came down to a single man. A 70-year-old banker with a thunderous temper and more raw financial power than any president of his time. His name was John Pierpont Morgan. Twice in his life, he would step in to rescue the United States from ruin, not as an elected official, but as a private citizen with a checkbook and an iron will. This is the story of the man who became a one-man Federal Reserve. Morgan was not self-made in the way of Carnegie or Rockefeller. He was born into wealth in 1837, the son of a powerful international financier, Junius Morgan, but his father raised him like a soldier being prepared for command, with brutal discipline, relentless correction, and impossibly high standards. Junius drilled into his son a single obsession. Character is the foundation of credit. A man's word, his reputation, his reliability, these were worth more than any amount of collateral. Young Pierpont learned to keep meticulous records, to study balance sheets the way other boys studied scripture, and to never, ever make a promise he could not keep. By the time he entered the family banking business, he carried a conviction that would define his entire career, that finance was not about money at all. It was about trust. America, in the decades after the Civil War, was a financial wilderness. Hundreds of railroads were laying track in every direction, bleeding cash, sabotaging each other, and collapsing into bankruptcy. Investors, especially the British ones who funded much of it, were terrified. Into this chaos stepped Morgan with a radical idea. Order. He began buying up warring railroads, forcing their feuding owners into the same room, and reorganizing them into stable, profitable systems. The process became so famous it earned its own name, Morganization. He would take a broken company, slash its debt, install his own directors, and restore it to health. By the 1890s, Morgan didn't just lend money to American industry. He controlled it, sitting on the boards of railroads, banks, and corporations that touched nearly every part of the economy. His first great rescue came in 1895. The U.S. government was hemorrhaging gold, its reserves nearly exhausted. The nation's money was on the verge of becoming worthless, and a proud President Grover Cleveland had no solution. Reluctantly, the government turned to Wall Street, to Morgan. In a now legendary meeting, Morgan calmly informed the president that he knew of a single large gold draft about to be presented that would empty the treasury entirely, perhaps that very day. The room went cold. Then Morgan offered a deal. He and his banking allies would supply the government with 3.5 million ounces of gold, much of it from Europe, and use his influence to keep it there. He pledged his personal reputation that the gold would hold. It did. One private banker had just propped up the credit of the United States government, but his defining hour came in October 1907. A reckless scheme to corner the copper market collapsed, taking banks and trust companies down with it. Panic spread like fire. Depositors stormed the banks. The stock exchange teetered on the brink of shutting its doors. With no central bank to intervene, Morgan, now 70 years old, became the de facto authority. He summoned the most powerful financiers in America to his private library and effectively locked them inside. Hour after hour, through the night, he forced them to pool their fortunes to save the institutions that could still be saved. He decided, almost single-handedly, which banks lived and which were allowed to die. At one point, he locked the bank presidents in overnight until they signed an agreement. By sheer force of will, he stopped the panic. The 1907 rescue saved the country, but it terrified it too. Americans looked at what had happened and asked a chilling question. How could the survival of the entire economy depend on the whims of one private man? It was too much power in too few hands. The irony is profound. Morgan's heroic intervention was the very thing that convinced the nation it could never again rely on a single banker. Out of that fear came the creation in 1913 of the Federal Reserve System, a permanent central bank designed to do by institution what Morgan had done by personality. In saving the system, he had made himself obsolete. The age of the all-powerful private banker was ending, and he had written its final chapter. Morgan died in 1913, the same year the Federal Reserve was born. When his estate was tallied, the richest banker in the world was worth around $80 million, a fortune, but a surprisingly modest one. Rockefeller, hearing the number, reportedly remarked that Morgan wasn't even a rich man, because Morgan's true wealth was never measured in dollars. It was measured in trust, the unshakable belief that when he gave his word, it was as good as gold. That was the lesson his father carved into him as a boy, and it is the lesson at the heart of every fortune that lasts. Money is temporary, but reputation compounds. Build a name people can bank on, and you will never truly be poor. That was the empire of J.P. Morgan, an empire built not on oil or steel, but on his word.